They say storms bring more than just rain. Sometimes they bring visitors. When this boy went to stay at his uncle's house during a violent thunderstorm, he thought the only thing he had to fear was the lightning outside. But that night, something was waiting by the garage. The last vestiges of sunset had slithered beneath the horizon, as if fleeing the impending darkness themselves. The sky was smothered by a blanket of swollen, bruised clouds, like the lid of a great celestial coffin. This wasn't merely the onset of night, it was the proclamation of a darkness poised to swallow everything whole. I was at my uncle's house that night. The reason? The incessant dust-choked construction work at our own home. My uncle's place was miles from the city's hubbub, situated at the dead end of an old neighborhood where time itself had slowed to a crawl. The houses here seemed to hold their breath, steeped in silent secrets and the scent of decaying brick. When night fell, the quiet didn't just deepen, it congealed into a thick, palpable silence where the fall of a single leaf would echo like a gunshot. The first raindrop hit the stone path with a soft, almost timid pat. Then a second, a third, and then, quite suddenly, the heavens split open. This was no mere gentle spring shower. It was a deluge, a biblical wrath. Torrents of water lashed against the window panes as if some fury-filled giant were trying to smash its way in. The wind found its voice, moaning as it squeezed the trunks of ancient oaks and rattled the old pub signs down the lane. And then it came, the lightning, a sharp, white-blue claw that for a split second rendered the room in such stark relief that every object cast a monstrous dancing shadow on the walls. It was followed instantly by a thunderclap that erupted from the belly of the sky, a percussive boom that vibrated not just in my eardrums, but deep in my bones. This was no mere weather front, it was a declaration of war. In such a state, all the inhabitants of the house were sequestered in their respective rooms, as if everyone was avoiding meeting the gaze of this sinful night. Contrary to horror film logic, I put on a comedy, hoping a few moments of laughter might dilute the dense fear. It proved futile. Behind every chuckle, the roar of the rain and the crack of thunder provided a dreadful soundtrack. Eventually, I conceded defeat and switched it off. Sinking into bed, I pulled the duvet tight around me, thinking this flimsy layer of fabric might be my only protection from the nameless dread of the night. The room was filled only with the monotonous, hypnotic whisper of the rain. My eyelids grew heavy, and the thread of consciousness began to slip from my grasp. At that very moment, the sky demonstrated its power once more. A tremendous, brilliant fork of lightning tore through the black cloth of the sky, bathing the entire universe in a blinding white light for a fleeting second. The immediate, window-rattling boom of thunder that followed shifted the very air pressure in the room. But alongside that explosion, another sound echoed in my ears. This sound was small, mechanical, and profoundly unnatural compared to the thunder's grandeur. A sharp, metallic clang, as if a heavy iron bar or perhaps a large tool had struck against a solid iron frame. The sound cut cleanly through the storm's chaos outside. Its source seemed to be the garage, a separate building directly opposite my bedroom window. My body froze for a second. My heart gave one powerful thud, then settled back into its rhythm. My brain was quick to reassure. Steady on. It's probably that old pipe wrench Uncle has hanging on the garage wall. The gusting wind must have shaken the door, and it's knocked against something else metallic. Yes, that'll be it." I squeezed my eyes shut tighter. I told myself that strange noises were commonplace on stormy nights. I adjusted my pillow and tried to focus all my attention on the monotonous drone of the rain, willing myself back toward sleep. Perhaps 10 minutes passed. I was still drifting in that hazy borderland between sleep and wakefulness, when suddenly, the same sequence. First, that jagged white lightning searing through my eyelids, followed instantly by the explosive crash of thunder, and with it, again, that sound. Clang. But this time, the sound was clearer. Before, it had been muffled and distant, but now it was as if the source was right by the garage door, or perhaps even behind it. There was a strange haste and purpose to it. It no longer sounded like something merely shaken by the wind. It felt deliberate, as if someone were intentionally striking it. This time, it was enough to crack the wall of my logic. My eyes snapped open. My heart thudded once more, but this time it didn't settle. It was like a wild animal battering itself against my rib cage, trying to break out. My breathing quickened. I sat up in bed, back straight, ears straining for every sound. My eyes had now adjusted to the dark. I began to scrutinize every corner of the room. The deep black space behind the old wardrobe. Was something hiding there? The corner of the ceiling where the shadows were so dense you couldn't make anything out. The window curtain trembling in a slight draft, as if someone was brushing against it from outside. I thought about this house. I'd only spent a few nights here. I'd never properly explored every nook, every drawer, every corner of the cellar. How many old memories, how many secrets was this house holding? Was this sound some long-forgotten secret of the house, waking up tonight? I was still lost in these thoughts when the storm displayed its power once again. A flash of lightning, a slight delay before the thunder, and then clang! No, this time it wasn't merely a sound, it was a thud. It felt as if a very heavy object had been dragged sharply across the garage floor and slammed into metal. The sound was now so close and distinct I could feel its vibration from my bed. I scolded myself. It's your imagination. You're in a new, isolated house. It's a stormy night. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You've read about psychology. This is all perfectly normal. But these reassurances were now ineffective. My hands were trembling. I gripped the duvet tightly, as if it were my only protective talisman. I lay back down, but now my eyes were fixed on the window, and my ears were on high alert, catching every sound. My mind was split in two, one part paralyzed with fear, the other futilely trying to maintain control. This internal war was far more terrifying than the one raging outside. It happened again. The thunder cracked the silence, but this time I was waiting for it. My whole body had become a machine calibrated for that one specific noise. And then it came. But this time it wasn't just a clang. The sound was now longer and scraping. Scrape. Clang! As if a heavy iron bar or pipe was being dragged across the concrete floor before being abruptly slammed into something. This sound carried the weight of effort, of intent. It wasn't the play of inanimate weather, but the handiwork of a conscious will. My veins truly did run cold. It felt as if particles of ice were coursing through my blood. My breath caught in my throat. A war erupted in my mind. On one side was a maddening panic screaming at me to shout and run. On the other was a vile sense of social embarrassment and shame holding me back. What if I wake Uncle and tell him he goes out to find nothing there? He'll think I'm a childish coward. Why wake the whole household over a meaningless noise? Finally, fear won over shame, but its solution was pathetically juvenile. I rolled over with a huff and lay facing the other way, my back to the window. It was that same trick every child's brain employs. If I can't see the danger can't hurt me. I shut my eyes with such force that stars bloomed behind my lids. Yet for some reason, a strange tingling ran down my spine. It felt as if I were being watched. Unboundless curiosity, a maddening desire to know what was out there took hold of me. I crawled on my own bed towards the window. My heart was hammering as if it intended to tear through my chest and escape. Using my fingertips, I gripped the edge of the thick cotton curtain and pulled it back a fraction, just an inch, creating a gap wide enough for a single eye to peer through. And then the sky burst open once more. That white, merciless light of a lightning bolt flashed a moment before its thunderous report, illuminating the entire garden like an overexposed photograph. And I saw, looming in the shadow of the garage's closed, weathered door, was a figure. It was impossibly tall, gaunt to the point of emaciation, as if skin were stretched taut over a skeleton. It wasn't a clear silhouette, but a shifting pile of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. The lightning only highlighted its contour, the sharp, angular slope of a shoulder, a hunched, skull-like structure, and, in its hand, there was a long, slender object that gave off a white gleam in the roofless light. It didn't look like any ordinary tool. It appeared to be a jagged, misshapen iron bar, one end resting on the ground, held fast in the creature's claw-like hand. The sight short-circuited my nerves. My entire body went numb. I jerked back involuntarily, my foot dangling over the side of the bed, caught awkwardly on the leg of the old oak side table. Then, crash! A tremendous noise, the sound of shattering glass, followed by a heavy thud. The old heavy brass desk lamp that had been in the family for generations lay in ruins on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot, echoing through the silent night. And then came the most terrifying moment. The shadow, the figure that had been standing by the garage, it jerked around. Its movement was not normal, not human. It was a twitchy, mechanical, and unnatural motion, like a cog in some ancient, rusted machine suddenly engaging. I couldn't see its face, but I was certain its gaze, its non-existent eyes, were traveling directly through that small gap in the curtain, right into my own. I had never known fear like it. I scrambled back into bed, pulled the duvet over my head, and sealed myself inside like a bucket with its lid clamped shut. I trembled at the sound of my own ragged breaths. I had become that child once more who believes that if he closes his eyes, the monster will disappear. But deep down, I knew, it knew I was here, and now the veil had been torn. The silence that followed the lamp's fall was not merely an absence of sound. It was a living, breathing presence that invaded the room. The noise of the rain, once so assaultive, was now just a distant, meaningless backdrop. This was the kind of silence that rings in your ears, that carries the weight of 1,000 unasked questions. Every second passed like the longest hour. I was frozen in my bed like a statue, gripping the duvet in my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. All my senses were heightened to the point where I could feel the individual fibers of my blood pulsing through my veins. "Maybe it's gone," my logical brain whispered, tentatively resurfacing. Maybe it was just a burglar, startled by the sound of the lamp smashing. He's probably run off. Yes, that must be it. This thought was a comforting lie, and I tried to force it into every fiber of my being. Or perhaps this was all my imagination. The storm, the new environment, the effect of those horror movies. What I saw was merely a trick of the light and shadow. There was no gleaming thing in its hand. It was just a trunk line seen from a bad angle. I began to convince myself. This idea was far more comforting than the fear that something was truly out there. But this comfort was precarious, because with every moment, with every breath, another thought was taking root in my mind. What if it hasn't left? What if it's still out there, just waiting? And what if it has come closer? This uncertainty had become a torture in itself. Knowing had become worse than not knowing. The question of whether something was out there or not now felt like a matter of life and death. My fear inside me screamed, "Stay put, keep your eyes shut, wait for morning." But curiosity, more powerful still, hissed like a venomous serpent. Just one look, only to know it's gone. Then you'll have peace. In the end, curiosity overpowered fear. It was the same motion as deliberately placing your hand on a burning coal, knowing it will sear. I disentangled myself from the bed. Every movement was made with the caution of someone crawling across shards of glass. On my knees and elbows, I moved like a fugitive, jeopardizing his own life. The floorboards creaked softly under my weight, each sound a deafening explosion in my ears. Reaching the window, I pressed my back against the wall. Holding my breath, I placed a finger on the heavy fabric's edge. My heart was hammering a warning. Don't look! Pull back! But I looked. I moved the curtain less than an inch, and one eye peered out. And it was right there. But it was no longer by the garage. It was now directly beneath my window, not just in the garden, but pressed right up against the wall of the house. Its feet were sunk into the wet, black earth, giving its unreality a savage solidity. Its entire face, or what passed for one, was tilted upwards. Without the lightning, it was merely a form of deeper darkness, cut out from the night's black veil, as if the color had been scraped away to reveal the void beneath. Then the clouds shifted, or perhaps the moon threw back its shroud, for a dim, merciless beam of white light fell, landing directly on its face, and I saw eyes. They weren't eyes. They were just two hollow, deep pits that seemed to draw in not light, but souls. They were like two burnt-out black electrical sockets, from which no life emerged, but which held the horrific power to pull all life towards them. And they were staring directly into mine. A scream, born not from my lungs or throat, but ripped from the darkest corner of my soul, tore from my mouth. It was a strangled, choked, and utterly horrified sound. I launched myself from the bed as if electrocuted. My foot tangled in the duvet, and I almost fell. My flight was graceless, purposeless, driven purely by the base instinct to survive. I ran for the door, fleeing from the shadow of my own fear, unaware that the monster was no longer just outside, but had now made a home forever in the darkest chambers of my mind. My body was flooded with adrenaline from what I had seen. I wrenched my bedroom door open and sprinted through the dark, silent hallway, as if death itself were at my heels. I beat on my uncle's door with both my clenched fists, as if I meant to splinter to wood. "Uncle! Uncle! Open up!" My voice was strangled and frantic. "There's someone outside!" A moment of silence stretched into an eternity. Then the door jerked open, and there he stood. My uncle's 6-foot frame, clad only in pajama bottoms, was tensed in a stance that betrayed his military past. In his hands was the family's old wood-stocked .303 bolt-action rifle, its barrel still gleaming with the promise of death even in the dark. But the most frightening thing was his face. Usually jovial and calm, it was now hard and steely. His eyes held not fear, but a deep, graven concern, as if he were preparing to face a long-dreaded foe. "You heard the noises too?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside rather than looking at me. His voice had a gravelly edge, a readiness for immediate action. "I've been stalking that thing through the house for the past half-hour, listening to the floorboards." Hearing this sent a different kind of jolt through me. It wasn't just my imagination. Uncle had heard it too. This confirmation obliterated my hesitation. "It's outside, Uncle," I panted, pointing a shaky finger towards my room. "Not by the garage anymore. It's under my window. It saw me." At these words, that strange glint in my uncle's eyes intensified. It wasn't fear, but a kind of resolution, as if an old suspicion had just been confirmed. He took a long, deep breath, snugging the stock of the rifle firmly against his shoulder. "Stay inside the house," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "and lock the door." And then, without a moment's hesitation, he stepped out. He was barefoot, wearing only his pajamas, but his stride held a determination that defied the weather. He walked directly into that poisonous dark, the rain immediately soaking his clothes and hair. He moved towards the corner where my window was, and then he vanished from my sight. Now I stood alone, by the door, a prisoner in my own home. Was it a burglar, a dangerous, deranged man using the storm as cover? Was that iron bar in fact a lever for forcing doors? Or was it something else? A spirit? Was the old garage or this very house a lodestone for some presence that Uncle already knew about? Were those sounds, the scraping and clanging of iron, the echoes of some old accident or betrayal that returned on every storming night? What happened to Uncle? Did he manage to drive it away? Was there a confrontation? Or did he himself become lost in the dark, taken elsewhere by the very thing he was hunting? I closed the door and leaned my back against it. From outside, only the sound of the rain remained. Then, suddenly, a faint muffled sound carried from afar. It wasn't a gunshot, nor a scream. It was that same familiar clang, but this time the sound didn't come from the direction of my room, but from behind the house, from the woods. And then, complete silence. Here I am now, huddled behind this door, my eyes fixed on the darkness outside, knowing that when this door opens, whoever or whatever is on the other side will be revealed, and whether the uncle who returns will be the same one who left. That is the question that will echo in the reader's mind, the most powerful form of fear, the dread that is not seen, but only felt.